Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wilson Center Africa program. We event on the changing nature of security threats in the Central Sahel region, the rise of self-defense groups and private security companies. This event is held under the Southern Voices Network for Peacebuilding banner, and we are joined by our wonderful scholar, Mr. Ansoumane Samassy Souare. He's our current SVNP scholar, and he's also a program officer with the West Africa Network for Peacebuilding. We are joined by our guest panelist, Ms. Tammy Palacio. She is a senior analyst and lead of the Priority Sustainable Counterterrorism portfolio at the New Lines Institute, and she's also a fellow at the Modern War Institute at West Point. I'll turn it over to Mr. Ansoumane to give his opening remarks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kyra, for that brief introduction. And before I start, I would like to sincerely thank for participants for making time for this presentation, and also those who are online for making sure today that they participate in this very important event. And also like to thank my dear friend Tammy. For your information, I met Tammy some 2 or 3 years ago in Ghana. So, and from there, our friendship continued. And when I came to DC, so I met her. And I think one of the challenges I had in DC is that getting people for meeting is quite challenging. But with all her, basic schedule, she has made time for this presentation. So, Tammy, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that. So, for the presentation this morning, as Kyra already said, the topic is on the changing nature of security threat in Central Sahel. But what is important to mention here is that my focus is on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, because when we say Central Sahel, the region is quite big. So, but just to draw your attention to that before we start. So it's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So as you already know, since 2012, Central Sahel countries have been battling with insecurity and humanitarian crisis created by violent conflict. And since then, various peace and security initiatives, both at the regional and international level, were established to counter this trend. Despite the presence of the European Task Force, including Operation Serval, Barkhane, and Takuba, under the French command and control, and also the UN multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, which is MINUSMA, the peace and security situation, as well as the humanitarian situation across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger deteriorated further, with more fatalities, destruction of properties, displacement, and also kidnapping. The persistence of this crisis created some level of mistrust between the authority of the affected state and their foreign partners, which finally led to their departure from the region. So I would like to ask 2 questions, but it's not like we are going to answer them now. But the reason is that just to, shape our discussion. So the first question I'm going to ask is that, has the situation in Central Sahel, region improved since the departure of foreign forces? That's my first question. The second question, have these countries or military government in Central Sahel collapsed as predicted by many security experts and analysts, in the region? So these are the 2 questions I'm going to ask. And I think during our discussion, we will further talk about them. So now, self-defense group. what is important to understand with self-defense group is that these groups are community-based organizations that provide some level of services, social services, in terms of protection to their people. They are also well organized, and their leadership is assured by traditional leaders who benefit from high-level respect and recognition from their communities. As regards the fighters within this group, they are mostly farmers, breeders, and especially young people who gather in the community to provide some level of security to their people and their properties. So most of these groups have existed even before the advent of terrorism and violent extremism in Central Sahel. So it's important to understand that. So however, with the advent of terrorism and insecurity, self-defense groups have experienced some level of metamorphosis in terms of their operations and membership in recent time. So they have expanded their influence and activities beyond their jurisdictions, preying on villages, imposing harsh taxes in markets and along trade routes, as well as seeking to control natural resources. Many of these groups have been accused of looting, extortion, and collaboration with trafficking networks involved in gun running and gold smuggling. So some of these groups also try to challenge state authority, especially the security forces in those countries. So the proliferation of self-defense groups in Central Sahel region could also be attributed to the failure of the state to provide adequate security to the people amidst terrorism and violent extremism that continue to affect these countries. So there have been many self-defense groups. So what we found in our research is that when you take Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, there's some level of differences. Because in Mali, you have over 19 self-defense groups that we found during our research. So as compared to Burkina Faso and Niger, the number of self-defense groups is not as many as that of Mali. So what we found in Niger was 3 main, self-defense groups. In Burkina Faso, we found 4. But Mali, over 19 self-defense groups that were identified. And what is also important to understand is that the state's authority try to regulate the activities of these self-defense groups. But, some of them, the activity of some of them escape state control, especially when it comes to Mali. So we think that as insecurity and humanitarian catastrophe continue, such groups will continue to proliferate even after the war against terrorism. Their activity will weaken the state and making Central Sahel countries ungovernable, with their implication for the entire West Africa region in terms of human rights, violation and abuses. Therefore, we think, especially I'm of the belief that, because many security experts have said that, the only way to get rid of this group is to bound them. But I don't think whether that would be a good approach. As I said earlier in my presentation, these groups, some of them existed before terrorism. But when you say that you are going to bound them, how are we going to replace some of the services they were providing? So my view is that it is important to professionalize some of these groups so that they can be more beneficial to their people. So, okay. So as I said, this group, it is obvious that military operations alone as a counterterrorism approach, is not the best approach. So, and we have seen that in Central Sahel, when it comes to this self-defense group, the state have taken some kinetic approach that now, is creating a lot of, havoc when you see, when it comes to their intervention, especially against terrorist group, that are operating in the region. So for self-defense group, we think that we also notice with the advent of terrorism and violent extremism in Sahel, this state's security or this state also try, to engage private security company, in their fight against terrorism and violent extremism. But what we have noticed is that some of these private security company, because when the crisis started, especially when the international solidarity was put in place to assist Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, there were some private security company that were, operating in Central Sahel, namely the Paramount Group, Dinko International, Daga World also were, we found that these private military security company were operating in Central Sahel. So, but now, following the departure of Western partners, we have noticed that the main private security companies that are more active now in Central Sahel, include the Wagner, and which is now branded as the African Corps, and also Sadat. Sadat is a private security, Turkish private security company that is operating in Mali. So what is important to note with private security company is that this group does not only, don't only focus on security support, but they also provide some services in terms of military equipment, training, risk management, and security services. So since 2020, Wagner continued to infiltrate defense and security forces in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And this infiltration marks a new era of military cooperation between Russia and Central Sahel country in their ongoing fight against terrorism. So according to state authority in Central Sahel, they are saying that Wagner came to fight insecurity and also fill in the gaps, the security vacuum that was created following the departure of the UN peacekeeping mission and the European forces. That is their argument. Whether that is true or false, but when we ask them, that is what they always say. So Central Sahel countries have welcomed Wagner and believe that Wagner is a trusted and reliable partner for ending terrorism and insecurity in Central Sahel. So as one of the conclusions that I also gave in regard to this part of the presentation is that as Russia continues to consolidate its influence and military presence in Africa, it is likely that Wagner will expand further and infiltrate more insecurity apparatus across these countries. So this presupposes that Central Sahel countries are likely to limit their counterterrorism effort solely on military operations. It is obvious that security operations alone as a counterterrorism approach have proven its limitation in many counterterrorism operations across the world. So Wagner efforts so far in Central Sahel lack the infrastructure for peace building and the long-term development strategy for Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So looking at the current situation, so what we can say is that, in addition to what has been highlighted, we also see that civil society organizations, journalists, and other activists, have been arrested and threatened by the military authorities that are in place now. Because, for instance, when you take Mali, they have bound the activities of political parties. Media, some of the media, media houses have been bound because the state does not want for this group, to put out information that people need. So, and that is the situation now across these three countries. So, moreover, the peace and security agreement previously signed between the states and some of these armed groups, have been partially or, totally revoked. And for us, we think that, that will have a serious, implication for peace and security in these countries. So before I conclude, these are some of the policy recommendations that we came out with. We believe that the U.S. government should continue its engagement and support with the African Union and the Economic Community of West Africa in their efforts to restore, constitutional order in coup-affected countries. So the second policy recommendation is that despite the high level of atrocity and human rights violations committed in Central Sahel, the crisis has yet received sufficient attention from international media and other key decision makers. Therefore, the international media and broadcasting corporation should also pay great attention to the crisis in Central Sahel and report consequently. The U.S. soft power engagement in Central Sahel should also prioritize engaging, strengthening the knowledge and operation capacity of youth and women-led group and organization. This will also contribute to the promotion of accountability and good governance that adhere to democratic principles. The last recommendation is that the U.S. drone base in Niger serves as a vital counterterrorism unit and deterrent against the progression of terrorists and other armed groups in West Africa and beyond. Therefore, I'm of the belief that the U.S. government should sustain engagement and dialogue with the military authority in Niger to maintain that drone base. So that is the last part of my presentation. Before I hand over to Kyra and also my dear friend Tammy, I would like to say thank you very much for your attention, and especially those who are also online following this discussion this morning. So thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ansoumane. I'm sure your presentation has encouraged quite a few questions, both in person and online. So we'll be joined by Africa Program Director Ogeona Bogu to moderate that portion of the event. But before we get there, have your wheels turning. For those questions, we'll turn to Ms. Tammy Palacios for her remarks.
Thank you. I was not going to click that button. Well, thank you. Good afternoon and happy Monday, because this is the start of a week, even though it might feel like a Wednesday to some of you. It feels like it to me. Mr. Ansu, it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you
I have the utmost respect for your work, and I just want to say quickly before I share some additions to the wonderful presentation that you just gave, how much I appreciate and respect WANEP as well. One of the larger coalitions of NGOs in West Africa, and definitely take a look at their policy reports and the work that they put out if you have not already. There's a lot of, in addition to ACLED and all the large databases, you can find a lot of really great information from reports that are put out from these, like WANEP. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
There's so much to cover, and you, I think, brought, we talk about Wagner a lot in DC, but I think the contribution of talking about the other PMCs is very important to this conversation. And I think I just want to start before I get too much on a tangent and lose the thought process. That there are a couple of things that I think as people that publish and researchers that we need to do more often, which is clarify the narratives that are incorrect, right? So the juntas have all very proudly claimed that they are successfully countering terrorism. They are not. It doesn't take a whole lot. Take a look at ACLED, take a look at any number of reports. And there's two things to look at when you're looking at successful countering of JNM and then ISGS, which are the two, JNM being, probably the 80% actor in the Sahel, the Al-Qaeda affiliate, and then Islamic State Ghouta Sahara being more active in Niger, but very, very much like 20% of the activity, right? Is that we have to look at the kinetic and the non-kinetic operations of these groups. And I think that's something that you very clearly stated in your recommendations and what you pointed out as what will only exacerbate the terrorism issue is that if you have solely kinetic counterterrorism, right, you have a counterinsurgency cycle, it will feed into more violence, and there's such a vast geographic area that you're just pushing these groups around, really. So if we're going to look at, okay, you need comprehensive kinetic and non-kinetic counterterrorism operations. It's also understanding that these groups operate in kind. The PMCs, they have their, you also explained, right? They're not just doing military security. There's also the equipment aspect. There's also the advice, the risk management. But we have to broaden our approach and how we look at these issues if we're actually going to come up with some sustainable solutions. So recognizing that these groups aren't just black and white, they're not just, they're multi-dimensional, and so any response will have to be multi-dimensional as well. So thank you for sharing those aspects, because those are definitely things that I think are missing from the conversation. I have a lot I can cover. I have information on Wagner, I have information on JNIM, so I'm not sure if you want me to just do a few points, or do you want to go to Q&A? Like, what do you guys want to do? You can do a few points. Okay, I'll do a few points, and then we'll open up. So I think one of the things that we were looking at, I just put out a report in April. Is it June already? Time flies. Yeah. Time flies, guys. On JNIM. So let's talk a little bit about that. On that non-kinetic civilian engagement strategy, because when you're looking at prevention, right, you're talking about civilian protection, you're talking about self-defense groups, you're talking about the laws and how each country, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are deciding to deal with them, right, and rein them in, so to speak. But they're civilian groups, they're community-based organizations, which you very, I think, clearly pointed out. So if you're talking about civilians, we need to take a step back and we're looking at what is the way forward, right? Like, what are we looking to suggest for prevention mechanisms? What are the policy recommendations that will actually mitigate and prevent, rather than just counter? Because when you get to the kinetic operations of these groups, you're already past prevention. You're at countering terrorism, and you're at dealing with the kinetic situation that's unraveled from atrocities from the state or Wagner or PMCs or self-defense groups, right? So I think it's part of our job to take a step back and look at what is the civilian relationship, what is the civilian experience, what is the threat that the civilians are experiencing from the PMCs, from the self-defense groups, from the terrorist groups. And sometimes it's not direct violence, sometimes it's threat of violence.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a blocking of movement, right? It's the road blockades that all of these actors are extorting civilians and their goods and services. You have JNIM doing things like they'll go in to control the next town and they will turn back road users, right? They will limit movement, they limit the services from entering that next town. They kind of almost squeeze the town before they actually engage kinetically and take control of it. So I think it's part of us, part of the solution is taking a step back and thinking what are we actually talking about? And I think that's the civilian experience and what is that threat that we are talking about, because it is more than just kinetic. Their lives are being threatened, their lives are being lost. We have the atrocities, Mora being the most horrible of them, right? 500 people. The very good UN report made that very clear for the whole world how horrible that was, right? But there's more events like that, which is very unfortunate. So I think that's my 2 cents before we open up and see what people want to hear a little bit more about. And hello.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Tammy, for your contributions to the discussion. Thank you as well, Ansoumane, for your presentation. I know that this is a topic that you are really passionate about, and you've been following for several years. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. My name is Oge Onoborgo, Director of the Africa Program here at the Wilson Center, and it's delight to host this conversation, though it's on a topic that isn't really one that is delightful in many ways, but I think the more that we can have people talking about the situation in Central Sahel, the more we can come together, put our heads together to think about viable solutions to address the crisis over there. And I think, as may have already been discussed or laid out by Ansoumane in his presentation, there is a crisis in Central Sahel. Have things gotten to the point where we are struggling, really thinking about how we intervene or provide the needed assistance? But as folks say, with every crisis, we should always view a crisis as an opportunity and an avenue for us to think creatively about how we engage. So with that, I want to open it up for questions. We will be taking questions online and questions in the room as well. When you ask a question, please introduce yourself and your affiliation. Keep the question brief so we have enough time for engagement and discussion on this topic. Again, with this conversation, we are only scratching the surface here. There are so many ways that we can go down in different angles in this conversation. So please, let's open this up now for discussion. And perhaps I will go ahead and start first, maybe to get the wheels turning here. So Ansoumane, with the situation in Central Sahel, I think to a point that Tammy made about the fact that the military juntas in the different countries where we've seen coups, even though they have given their excuse of intervention as one to address security, we've seen instances of insecurity actually on the rise in many of these environments. So I want to get your thoughts. I know you've already laid out some policy recommendations, but I want you to sort of drill down even further and be a little more concrete when we think about self-defense groups in the region. Now, these self-defense groups are not new in Central Sahel. There are several of them. How do you think we can effectively engage them, given that some of them may not necessarily be registered by their state bodies? Some of them might still be regarded as informal vigilante groups. We have seen in other parts of West Africa, say for instance in northeast Nigeria, where you've had civilian joint task force vigilante groups working closely with the military there to address the threat of Boko Haram. So I'm wondering if you could drill down a little bit in Central Sahel, knowing that there are many self-defense groups in the region.
Okay. Thank you very much, Oge, for that question. I think at the beginning of my presentation is something that I spoke about. It was a question that I asked, especially when it comes to security, since the departure of the Western UN peacekeeping mission and the European forces. So It is very disheartening to see what is happening in Central Sahel region because, as you all know, last year, Burkina Faso was one of the countries that experienced a lot of terrorist attacks with more fatalities. And we've seen also in Niger and Mali. So for me, looking at what is happening now in the region, I'm not seeing any improvement when it comes to security in these countries. And especially the kinetic approach that is being used now by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to handle security issue in the country, for me, is making the situation worse. Because always, for those who follow Burkina Faso, Mali especially, every now and then, when they are having like a news program, you see, the state has decided to bring that, just to inform people. You see airstrike targeting, people, whether they are terrorists or they are civilian, nothing like that is being verified. Every day, that is the situation. So that has created a lot of, chaos in some of the communities across these countries. So in terms of engagement with self-defense group, I'm of the belief that, as I said in my presentation, some of these groups have been there even before terrorism. So when you want to engage those things, I think those groups, for me, it's important to do that. As part of the recommendation I gave is that many security experts have said that the right approach is to bound this or disbound this group. And for me, that won't be a great approach, because groups that have been there for years or ages, you cannot just come to just disband those groups like that. What I think that would be the right approach is to make sure that this group are professionalized, so that the security or the community can benefit more from them. So that is what I can say as a response.
Thank you. Tammy, did you want to add anything on that point on professional, making self-defense groups more professional?
No, I think that's exactly what I would say. I think the only thing I would add is that part of that professionalization is also building of the structures of the state, the institutions that would encourage following of human rights law and humanitarian approaches, because you can have a professional force, but if they're not held to a judicial structure, then you're going to have a hard time upholding that. And there was something, I want to cite it so badly, but I can't remember who wrote it, but there was a researcher that was talking about the informal and the formal systems and institutions. And I think that's something that you have these self-defense groups often operating in areas that aren't the city centers, right? So you might have more of an informal structure that could be strengthened or maybe connected to the formal structures as a complement to the professionalization, or to achieve the outcome that we're looking for, right? Which is that abiding by human rights law, humanitarian law.
Thank you so much. I think it's very important that you say that, because we talk so much about ungoverned spaces and how a lot of terror groups or insurgencies operate in ungoverned spaces. And I remember someone saying, we define these spaces as ungoverned in the US because we don't understand them, but there are actually people who understand how these spaces are governed. So we should be careful when we throw around terms like ungoverned spaces, because there are these spaces we refer to as ungoverned actually have governance systems that we're not aware of, and perhaps we need to rely on local knowledge to understand how those places are really run. Open to questions? Okay.
Hi, thank you for the
Use the microphone, please, so our folks online can also hear you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. My name is Maysoon. I'm a fellow for the Payne USAID Fellowship, and I'm really excited to learn how to be a better support in the Sahel when I have that opportunity. I'm curious about the the self-defense groups and what services they provided previously. And if you could just explain a little bit more about what that looks like and what their professionalism would look like in like community accountability, like you touched on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very good question. I briefly, spoke about it in the presentation. When you go back to these communities, for instance, Mali, looking at the, size of the country, the presence of the state is very, minimal in some of the, regions, especially in the north, the far north of Mali. Okay, so and due to that, communities try to organize themselves, because whatever happened, criminal group will exist. Okay, there are some services in terms of, as I said, in terms of protection that they give. Some of these groups originate from, farming communities and also header communities. So in order to make sure that their cattle or their farms are well protected, so this group, the community try to put these young people together, in order to make sure that their properties are kept in a very safe manner. Yeah. Do you have anything to add? Yeah.
I think that was a pretty good answer.
Thank you.
We'll take some more questions.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Anthony from the State Department, the Africa Bureau Regional Peace and Security Office. I wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit about opportunities kind of within some of the instability, the formation of the Alliance of Sahelian States, of those three countries. What opportunities do you see in that? And I guess the withdrawal from ECOWAS in there, what are some, if any, positive aspects that maybe can be pursued through that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just give a bit of context to before I answer the question. We all know what's happening in end 2023. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger decided to quit the regional economic bloc, the West African regional economic bloc, which is ECOWAS. So some of the reasons that were put forth is that, ECOWAS has become a threat to regional stability in West Africa. That is what the authorities said. And that instead of responding, to the root causes of conflict, ECOWAS is just trying to, heighten tension in the region. These are some of the arguments they put forth. But looking at what's in terms of the opportunities, I don't think whether the decision of this country to depart from ECOWAS was a very good idea, because when you look at the nature of security threat in the region, many states put together are still struggling, to have security. Talk less of 2 or 3 countries coming together, to form an alliance, and also focusing on security. For me, the opportunities are very minimal. The opportunities are very minimal, looking at the, the nature of security threat, confronting these 3 countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And what I would advise is that, looking at the situation, it would be good for these countries to take advantage of what is happening now, in the region, because when you look at the geopolitics that is happening in West Africa, Russia is trying to, reinforce its presence in West Africa. For me, trying to reform ECOWAS that will respond to the need of the people, I think that would be a very good approach. But leaving ECOWAS, for me, is not a good solution. Yeah. Pami, do you have anything?
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question, because I think that's something that a lot of us asked ourselves when that happened. I see a couple of opportunities in that I think the atrocities are bad. The Wagner's engagement is very real. The terrorist activity increasing is happening, right? But I think that there are a couple of changes in this whole landscape that we can acknowledge do provide openings for the U.S. and other actors who do not want to see a continued autocratic Central Sahel. And one of those being the change in Wagner's structure. They are in a regrouping stage. So Wagner has now been officially placed under the Minister of Defense in Russia. And that's a huge difference, right? You had Putin and every single country that was engaging with Wagner denying their presence and existence when we knew it was there. So that's a change legally that opens opportunity for sanctions and other like legal international routes, right? Because of that connection, the clear connection to the Russian state. And you have it'll probably be fine for the next year, but you have Wagner kind of being split between two other PMCs, Redoute and Convoy. So it's not a holistic one group. There's politics that could be encouraged to play out, or we may just see it play out on their own, right? You have a very profitable empire that is being regifted and reassigned, right? So that's not an easy process, and they may not be as strong as an organization as they were, and that's something that we could play on. Another thing is, I think, just the facts, right? You have the juntas, they obviously have their political lines, right? We took over control because we need to counter terrorism. We're kicking the US out because you are physically here, but you are not kinetically combating these terrorists, so therefore you are not our friend, right? And those are, a political line is a political line, but you can't dispute the activity that is going to continue to happen. And so I think Burkina Faso and Mali have been the epicenter of this in Central Sahel. But Niger has been quite fortunate because of the U.S. presence and in the Western engagement that they have not been there's activity, but it's not as it is in Mali or Burkina Faso in its epicenterness, right? So one thing to watch, and something that we're seeing right now, is Janum, for example, right, has this kind of set spike strategy. So they have an abduction release strategy that they will they operate non-kinetically, and then they take over the towns, and then they operate kinetically. We are already seeing that happen in Niger, past the points where you see activity. So you almost see a line of like kinetic activity, and then they're non-kinetic further in. So it's coming, it's happening. That is the direction that this group is choosing to take. So how long will Niger feel like the Band of Brothers when they see more activity in their borders? So if that's inevitable, right? Because their counterterrorism is not working, so that will succeed, right? They will see more activity. What will the U.S. response be? What will the international response be? What is the play to take advantage of that opening? Because we don't have a lot of them. It's a very conflict-saturated area. So I think thinking ahead is something that we should do a little bit more of.
Okay, just a quick, I wanted to ask, so in regard to the question asked, I think one of the opportunity also could be looking at the acceptability of the U.S. government in these countries, because when I try to juxtapose what's happened to France and other European countries, you see that in Mali, in Niger to be specific, or in Mali and Burkina Faso, you see that France embassy was shut down in those places, and they tried just to, stop anything like communication between France and Mali or Burkina Faso. But when you look at, despite all the, challenges or upheavals, the U.S. embassies are still operational in these countries. So that is to tell you that, there is some level of willingness, to stay engaged the United States of America. So, and I think that the U.S. should also see this opportunity to engage further with this group, with these countries, for more peace and security across Sahel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ansoumane. And perhaps if I could just add on a few sort of concrete points in terms of opportunities for engagement in the Central Sahel region. For one, we're just coming up on the 49th year anniversary of ECOWAS. And ECOWAS is in the process of deep thinking and really reflecting on what has happened over the last 49 years. And I think going back to what the organization was originally created for, economic integration, at this point we're looking at a region of over 400 million people in West Africa. So this is an opportunity where the United States and other international actors can work pretty closely with ECOWAS to really try to rethink what the future would be for this regional body. For once in the region, we're actually seeing, well, not for once, but once in a very, very long time, we're seeing citizens question the state-society relationship. We're seeing citizens question the social contract in the region. So this is an opportunity to really think through what transition could look like. Because in the past, very often, this is not the first time we've seen coups in West Africa, but very often after a coup, you transition right back to the same type of government that you were trying to get away from in the first place. So this is an opportunity to really think through transition. Let's not also forget that Guinea is one of those countries where we saw a coup, but Guinea isn't part of the AES countries. So there's an opportunity there to really think through how we work closely with civil society actors and other actors within Guinea to think through transitions. And when I say transitions, not only elections. Now, compared to other regions on the continent, elections in West Africa is actually one that a lot of, citizens still value. If given the opportunity to vote, citizens will be able to elect their right leaders. And we have seen in the AES countries that very often when a junta comes into power, it's not about protecting the citizens anymore, it's about protecting the administration. So they'll keep on pushing those election dates because they know if given the opportunities, citizens will vote in the right actors or who they feel is representative of their views. I think another thing to keep in mind too as well, going back to the economic question, is integration and movement across West Africa. There's a lot of trade that happens amongst the different countries. Between Niger and Nigeria, you really don't, it's the same people that live on both sides in both countries. And we see this across the board in other countries too as well. Once citizens start seeing that frustration of being able to move, to trade, that's going to be a problem. So these are opportunities that we can we can work with civil society groups, trade groups, private actors, and the rest of them now to really think through what the future will be. I think governance programming, it will be important to think about how we engage and support governance programming on political transitions. I think these are some of the areas where we can engage effectively, and we will see willing partners in civil society to work with the US and other international actors. So I have a couple of questions online, but before I turn to the online questions, I want to figure out if there are any questions in the room first before I take any other questions in the room before I take these questions online. Chris?
Thank you for your presentations. I'm Chris O'Connor from the National Endowment for Democracy, and I know, as we've all been discussing, there's tension between ECOWAS and the Central Sahelian states. With the recent election in Senegal, do you see any opportunities for renewed regional engagement to either push for better security policies or better steps towards transitions?
Okay, Chris, thank you very much for that question. First of all, I would like to leverage some of the initiatives that have been taken by Diomaye Faye since his election in Senegal. I think not even more than 2 weeks or 3 weeks when he was elected, I think he undertook some, tours across West Africa. I don't know what, was said, but some of the things they could have, they said, could be security issues, in West Africa, and also economic, economic growth in West Africa. And I also noticed during his campaign, they were talking about, getting rid of the money, the currency that is used in 8 West African countries. And the idea behind that was to come out with a common currency in West Africa. And I think he has been championing that. So I think that with his election, there are a lot of opportunities that we could, think of. Yeah, that is what I can say, because he has been engaging his counterparts in Guinea, La Côte d'Ivoire. Recently, I think he was in, was it Guinea-Bissau? Yeah, so he has been moving around. And I'm of the view that during some of these trips, I'm sure that they have been discussing issues relating to peace and security and economic prosperity in West Africa. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Let me take these questions online. So there's a question here about the international community and asking if the international community can effectively assist in addressing the grievances of everyday people in the regions by their governments for the sake of lasting peace in the region. So what recommendations would you give to the international community to address the grievances, the very real grievances that everyday people feel to what we've seen in the region? And then there is another question here, which I don't know if we have an answer for this, but it's can Africa eradicate terrorism in the region by itself? Can Africa, as in the AU, ECOWAS, and other African governments in the region, can they tackle the challenge of terrorism on their own without support from the international community? So those 2 questions.
Yeah, I think the first question, I think you open the first question.
The grievances or terrorism?
Okay. Yes.
I'll do 2 cents and then I'll pass to you. So I think something to understand is that engagement with terrorist groups is different based off every landscape. So every single Al-Qaeda affiliate, every single ISIS affiliate, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, right, have that shared goal. As networks, as general, right, like groupings, they have different ways of operating, but each individual group, each individual affiliate has a different modus operandi on the very local level. And so I think what we have a really good sense of, and UNDP did their 2 reports, I think 2018 and 2023, right, Pathways to Extremism, and we have general understanding of a few pathways, right, radicalization, we're familiar with that, Middle East, right, Iraq, Syria, ISIS, height of ISIS, where we know the grievances, the socioeconomic, but there's a pathway that doesn't get talked about as much, and I think is important to answering this question, and that is that if you are a villager in a town, and your town is not closely connected to the state services, you don't have security, you don't have, maybe you have 3 different self-defense groups that are kind of fighting over protecting you, maybe the right choice for that village, it's not that they're radicalized to the group. It's not that they're aggrieved. There are grievances, and I think Ansoumane, you probably have a couple of points to that. Grievances do exist because state atrocities exist, and misrepresentation or underrepresentation is very real. But there's also just making a choice, right? You're someone that wants to live. You pay the tax. You comply. You are threatened. Hey, if you are sharing information with with JNIM, and ISGS is the person in front of your town, then you don't do that, and then you have the self-defense forces or the PMCs or the state forces saying, you know, if you share information with JNIM or ISGS, then we're gonna kill you. So sometimes it's just a matter of who's in control of that area. And that third choice, I think, is really important to acknowledge, that not everyone is aggrieved, but there are grievances. So I'm gonna pass to you to talk about what we can do to address that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tammy, for that contribution. I would like to, before coming to what Tammy said, the first question about the international community, you know, when it comes to Africa, I think what I would say is for the international community to be just in its approach or approaches. Because when you go back to the crisis in Guinea, for instance, what led to the coup in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea. You know, we all know when President Alpha Condé was in Guinea, you know, after serving 2 terms, you know, he tried to tamper with the, you know, constitution. He amended the constitution, and with all the, you know, grievances, people spoke about it, but nothing happened. Where were the international community during those days? Okay, so these are some of the things people have been, you know, ordinary citizens like myself, we have been observing. You go to Mali, you know, there was election, and the election was rigged. And after that, the military decided, you know, to take over. So these are some of the things that, you know, the international community should, you know, be very just when it comes to, you know, condemnation. If something is wrong, you know, no matter who is responsible, you know, the international community position should be clear on some of those things. But if, you know, we try to side with some and also try to leave other people, for me, you know, the issues are not going to be resolved, you know. And also, in addition to that, is the support that Africa needs from the international communities. So some of those things have to be taken into consideration. If these things are well handled, I'm of the belief that some of the, you know, issues confronting Africa could find solution. So Tammy, as you said, you know, when it comes to terrorism, oftentimes when people feel that they have been abandoned, you know, it creates a sense of like, okay, if the state is no longer responding to our needs, let's just try to do something for ourselves. In case of any alternative, people are likely to choose that. These are some of the things that we have been facing in some of those countries, in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. When you go to the far north, for instance, in Mali, you won't believe the way people are living in those places. Okay, Niger, the same thing. Burkina Faso, also the same thing. So some of those grievances have to be, you know, addressed by the state. Otherwise, we are going to see, you know, a lot of terrorist movement and group across this part of Africa. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we are actually at time, but one minute.
Thank you for your presentation.
Can you use the mic?
Mali.
Sir, can you use the microphone so they can hear you online?
I am from Mali. I'm from Mali, and I've been listening to you. I didn't want to intervene, but you know, something told me, you know, I have to say something before I leave. You talk about the international community. I am Malian, and I've worked for a long time for the Center of Strategic Studies. I did a lot of research. And today, I am the first counselor at the Embassy of Mali. And I know Mali better than anybody here. So I heard a lot of things. Some of things are I agree with some of the things, but some of them, things like insecurity is rising. You have no proof, but insecurity is rising in Mali. Today, you said, the government was nowhere because Mali is a very huge country. The government could not cover the whole place, but today, the army is everywhere. I don't know if you heard about Kidal. They went and, liberated Kidal. And they are from the south all the way to the north, the army is everywhere. But let's not talk about that. Now let's talk about the international community. I don't know if few years ago, Mali used to be known as the best democracy in West Africa. Today you're talking about Senegal, but few years ago, it was Mali. But you know what happened in Mali after the election? You talk about after the election. You had a crisis in the time of President Ibeka. People went out in the street for 2 months. They were manifesting in the street for 2 months. The international community didn't do absolutely nothing. And the people, they don't have arms. All they can do is to manifest in the street. So that's how we had the coup d'etat. That's how, the military came into, power. If the international community had done something, maybe today we wouldn't talk about coup d'etat in Mali. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So Ansoumane and Tammy, let me ask you all to give sort of your closing thoughts and remarks. Tammy, we'll start with you, and then we'll come to Ansoumane. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone's questions and interventions. The point is to have a discussion, right, and to hear everyone's points of view, so thank you. I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you, Ansoumane, for inviting me. I think every time we attend a panel or a conference, I like to think of what's next. What is the next thing that we should be researching? What is the next conversation we should be having? Because we all get inspired, and then we can't just leave this room and leave the conversation where it landed, right? And I think part of the movement, part of that sustainable solution, the long game forward, is what can we do? What every single researcher here can work with civil society. So if we have a shrinking civic space, and there are hundreds of civil society organizations, I think was a coalition of 700 members, we can all, just as individuals, kind of be an answer to something like that, right? We have the internet. We can all be friends and partners with civil society. And I think that when we're doing our programming, what is the answer? It's long partnerships. It's West African partners, whether it's civil society or a state, knowing that agreement, that MOU, that program is going to be more than 6 months or 3 months or 1 year or 2 years. Change doesn't happen in 6 months, especially when half of that 6 months is spent filling out paperwork. So I think longer term, and it's just out of respect of the situation. Conflict and humans are complex. There's simplicities to it, but I think we have to extend the length of programming in respect that things take time to change for lasting change.
Thank you, Tammy. Ansoumane, closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, Oge. I would like to say a big thank to the participants, those here and also those online. And I also extend that same thanks to the Wilson Center, especially the African program, for giving us this opportunity. I sincerely appreciate all the support from the beginning to now you and your staff have provided us. I remember when I came newly in DC, the cold was too much, and I was just shivering everywhere. I remember Nia taking me to Bank of America, and that day I was shivering. Yeah, so these are my memories in DC. My last word would be that, as you said earlier, I'm very passionate about the topic I just presented. And if there is opportunity for me to further my research on this topic, I think that will be welcome. And as we are all in this room, so there's an appeal to all of you who may also be interested in this topic. So I look forward to any collaboration to further interrogate some of the things that we raised during this presentation. So thank you very much to online participants and also those who are in the room.
Thank you very much, Ansoumane. And like with every good conversation on West Africa, all the questions and comments start coming at the end of the discussion. So really look forward to continuing the conversation, and we hope we keep this. It's not going to be a one-off discussion. There are opportunities for engagement in West Africa. We just have to work together to figure out how to really engage. So thank you all so much. Please join me in thanking Ansoumane.